investigation on I'm quite grateful to you all because not only have you given me the space to share my findings, but you'll have given space to the story of the flood victims in this little known, culturally and biologically diverse region of our country. So before, like, I sort of, so this talk is about a field investigation that I undertook to learn that after learning that the Dibang River in Arunachal Pradesh had shifted its course and wiped out 2 villages in 2015. But before I sort of dive into my findings, and introduce you to the region, I'd like to thank the following people and organizations for their support. Like, this work would not have been possible without the support I received from the editors at thirdpole.net, people in Bangalore, my family, people in rowing in Arunachal Pradesh helped me a lot. The Gram Panchayats and the families at the villages of Bizrari, Anpum, Bango, and Paglam like helped me a lot. Like, often, I mean, the poor people, and they gladly hosted me at no cost, and a lot of people even guided me without taking any money. I was helped by people in Assam. I'm grateful to Planet Labs and Company, European Space Agency, and NASA for their satellite images. And I'm indebted to the open source community for all the code that I use off the internet. So moving on, like a short introduction to the region, Arunachal Pradesh is one of the 8 states in India's northeastern part of the country. It is a fairly vast region of about 262,000 square kilometers and comprises about 12% of India's total spatial area. Arunachal is the largest state in the region with 83,743 square kilometers. It also covers 3 geological regions, the Himalaya, which is up to like all the way from the western Himalayas all the way till here, the Indo-Burmese mountain range, which is around here, and it's also also the Ganges batholith forms a significant part of the geological region in eastern Arunachal Pradesh, which is technically, in some sense, part of the Tibetan Plateau. But it is also a region with a low population density with an average of only 17 persons per square kilometer. And that sort of gives us an idea of the vastness of this area that is perhaps just wilderness. So about 60,000 square kilometers of Arunachal's land is covered in forests, making it the state with the largest forest cover in India. It is therefore not surprising that this is a part of the Himalaya biodiversity hotspot, and it is the source of hundreds of streams and tens of large rivers that feed the enormous Brahmaputra River. The Dibang River is one of those 3 glacier-fed rivers that merge to form the Brahmaputra around here. It is the longest of these 3 rivers is the Yarlung Sangpo, whose source lies close to Mount Kailash and close to the Indus River source as well in Tibet. It is about 2,000 meters long, up to its confluence with the Dibang River somewhere here. Once the Yarlung Sangpo enters Arunachal Pradesh, it is referred to as the Siang. So it enters Arunachal Pradesh over here, and it is referred to as the Dihang or the Siang by the Adi groups of tribes. The other river that merges with the Dibang and the Siang is the Lohit River, and that comes all the way from here, enters Arunachal Pradesh around here, and then merges with the Siang and the Dibang around here. It is known as Zail Nugushu in Tibet. It is about 380 kilometers long. The Dibang is about 216 kilometers long, and its source entirely lies within Arunachal Pradesh. No stream or no river comes from Tibet that feeds into the Dibang River basin. So the word Dibang is actually an Adi word for a type of bamboo that is used in house construction according to a 2009 Adi dictionary. However, it is not clear how the river itself received its name because it has different names in different languages. The Idumishmi tribe referred to the river as the Dibang in the flood basin, which is here. But then in the mountains, they refer to it as the Talo. Sorry? So, okay, sorry for the disturbance. The Dibang River is split into 2 districts, the Lower Dibang Valley district and Dibang Valley district, and it has an area of about 14,000 square kilometers. So in 2017 and 2018, I was investigating a series of natural hazards on the Siang River, and it led me to closely examine the satellite images of the Dibang's floodplain. I wondered if there was bank erosion on the Siang, as there I wondered if there was bank erosion uh, on the Dibang's banks because there has been significant erosion on the Siang's banks. I noticed that the Dibang River had shifted west in 2015 and had started to drain into the Siang River much further north than before. So now the Dibang River drains into the Siang here rather than here. So in 2019, so at that time when I realized Google Earth hadn't yet updated its satellite imagery, it was still showing satellite imagery before 2015. So it wasn't clear it wasn't clear which villages had flooded at that point of time. After some searching, I found that the Dibang had moved west and had wiped out two villages, Anpum and Loklong, in Lower Dibang Valley district. In 2015, it was reported by three news agencies, after which little information came out on the status of the flood victims. It wasn't clear what had caused the floods. Was it extreme rainfall or a glacial lake outburst flood? So, a glacial lake outburst flood occurs when a glacial lake bursts from its natural dam and propagates into a flood wave downstream. It generally collects as much of debris as it can as it moves downstream, and essentially acts uh, like a highly erosive force that moves through the gorge, trying to dissipate as much of energy as it has gathered. This generally is quite catastrophic. And for example, earlier this year in February, the Uttarakhand landslide, the landslide that had occurred in Uttarakhand was something not exactly a glacial lake outburst flood, but turned out to be a debris flow event. This is not unusual in this region because I had expected something like this to happen in the Dibang because in the Siang Valley this has happened, and we know of several lake outburst floods and glacial lake outburst floods in the recent past. And I felt this was the lead to follow. But cloud-free and snow-free views of the glaciers are rare, and the lack of good images in 2014 and 15, and the disappearance of this particular glacial lake in 2016 sort of led me to a dead end. I wasn't sure how to interpret this, and it was very difficult to rule out or to conclude that a glacial lake outburst flood had indeed been the cause of the floods that wiped out these villages. So
Chintan,
I
can
turned
I
my
ask you a question?
Sure, sure.
So in the previous slide, what are we supposed to understand from the colors?
So red is actually vegetation in a different spectral reflectance band that optical satellites capture. Blue is water. This is ice. This is a glacier. This is perhaps snow as well as ice. It's just a really saturated image because it's just too bright for the satellite sensor to record correctly. These tiny little blue blips are probably errors in the satellite image. And this is mountain shadow.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I turn my attention to rainfall events to know if extreme or above normal rainfall may have led to the flooding of the region. But the rapid changes in the river's path was shocking to observe and indeed had taken the villages of Anpum and Loklong by surprise. So when I had met the people of Anpum and Loklong, they recall walking several kilometers downstream in the rain by the raging river to find a motorboat. Some women were nursing newborns and had to escape by boat across the rapidly expanding river with deadly rapids. Several men stayed back as it was too dangerous along this side, uh, and they dismantled their homes and lived off the land for a few days. So ultimately, in October 2015, this is how the river expanded. So they were caught up on this side. They were trying to move down and get to a better place, but it was proving to be quite difficult in the rain. I searched for satellite images during August and September in 2015 to see if there was any rapid shift in the Dibang River's drainage. I thought perhaps NASA's Landsat 7 had captured something. Generally, we don't use Landsat 7 because it had some image scanline issues, and these images were full of black bands. The other problem is that it's not correctly georeferenced. So what that means is that when I'm actually looking at the geographical vicinity of Anpum and Loklong, Landsat 7 may not be showing me Anpum and Loklong, maybe showing me some other place. So with a lot of effort, I sort of managed to put it together, and I found that there was a rapid expansion between August 11th and September 19th of 2015 that led to this event, this catastrophe. So green over here is vegetation, and the pinks uh, is actually sediment. It's just it's not exactly true color, but these are some of the bands in which the satellite takes images of the planet. So I searched Google Earth Engine's data repository for gridded rainfall data, and sure enough, the rainfall data revealed that there was above normal rainfall sometime at the end of August. Uh, so the first news reports came out on 7th September. So this is definitely the correct time period to sort of examine rainfall data. So a note here is that while the extreme event, as per meteorological definitions, occurred in June, and the meteorological definition of an extreme rainfall event is when when there's the precipitation has reached its maximum daily value of the year. So while the extreme event actually occurred in June, the rainfall at the end of August and beginning of September was actually what led to the floods. So the June rainfall on June 5th was about 228 mm. And in 12 days, there was 682 mm at the end of August. And that was quite shocking. So the gray region is actually what I would say what we could consider normal. It sort of accounts for any kind of change due to due to climate change. It accounts for that as well. It's sort of so anything beyond the gray region tells us that this is definitely above normal. This is nowhere close to being within the normal range from 1981 to 2020. So in August and September, so this is what we had seen on August 25th. We had an extreme rainfall. We had an above normal rainfall event, a gap in a day, some more rain, and then finally by August 10th, things seem to have subsided. I myself was actually caught between landslides and a flooding river during the same time in the Dibang Valley. Unknown, I did not know that there was something severe unfolding downstream. And I actually I was lucky enough to capture the river and its flood, but it's quite a force. It's quite a phenomenal, I mean, body of water. I apologize for the footage. Yeah. That's the Emra River, and this is the Dibang or the Talo. So I had a hunch that cyclonic activity may have led to this above normal rainfall event. And sure enough, Cyclone Korman had made landfall on August 2nd on the coast of Bangladesh. Perhaps the extreme rainfall was due to the cyclonic storm, except that the effects of it were experienced 3 weeks after landfall. There was large-scale flooding and landslides in Myanmar because of this cyclone. So I found it hard to believe that a single cyclonic storm could have led to such a large shift in the Dibang's flow. I thought perhaps the Dibang had been moving west for a long time and finally reached a threshold beyond which it snapped, rapidly moving west and took away Anpum and Loklung. But I was wrong. I compared satellite images from 1986 up to 2015 and checked if above normal rain and cyclones had any effects on the region's geography. Of particular interest was 1998, where you see that the Dibang has shifted quite far west and not exactly abandoned its easternmost channels, but has shifted most of its flow to the westernmost channels. So in this time series, you can see that the Dibang remained within its channels from 1986 to 1997, and after heavy rainfall because of the cyclone, it shifted further west, and it started capturing several smaller streams and tributaries that come in from the west. Now it still continues to drain much of its water along the westernmost channels, and several of these regions over here have sort of reclaimed and regenerated into flooded grassland ecosystems that is typical of the Brahmaputra Valley. This is what the place looks like in 2021. So we see that this is the Lohit River, this is the Siang River, and much of the flow, even in the dry season, is channeled through this particular channel. Bizari is here, Anpum and Loklung used to be here. So in 1998, the first cyclonic storm over the Bay of Bengal developed at the end of May. On 30th May, there was widespread and heavy rainfall across Northeast India. This one event in 1998 perhaps made a radical difference in the geomorphology of the river's channel, compelling it to expand and erode the western banks. The Dibang River has not yet gone back into the earlier channels, possibly because those channels have too much debris blocking the flow. They may be higher in elevation than the westernmost channels. And it seems like above normal rainfall and changes in the river's geography, above normal rainfall is associated with changes in the river's geography. For example, between 2011 and 2012, we see that there was above normal rainfall in 2012, and you have a lot of sediments deposited farther inland. This particular channel, which is the Anpum River, expanded, and there's a lot of sediment deposition. Some other tributaries of the Dibang also, and Dibang and the Siang also have a lot of sediment deposition. And looking at the data, it showed that September 2012 did have above normal rainfall. So finally, when we look back at the last decade of change in this area, the power of the river is quite astonishing. So this is December 2011. This is December 2012. This is 2015. Yeah. In 2021. So it's just, there's really nothing that is preventing it from pushing further and further inland. It's not sure how much more it's going to erode the banks and how much further is it going to go. This is what Anpun looked like.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Chintan?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So given what one knows about this terrain, there are two questions. One is, how predictable are these changes? Can one say whether, in which direction the river will change course, and if so, to what degree?
Okay.
I guess, and the second, I guess, just this question for now.
So I think it's difficult to make it predictable at the scale of, say, a real-time predictable situation. But I think if we calibrate rainfall across from, say, the 1980s or earlier to now, and we compare satellite images from the earliest time possible, say 1980s, we can potentially come up with Sorry? Oh, sorry about that. So they can be a solution to understand if rainfall of this amount in a set period, like say in a 5-day window, if it crosses this threshold, you can expect radical changes in the river's geomorphology. What is sort of at least I can say amateurly predictable is that we can see, like, people on the ground as well as I can, and local people, they know that this place is going to go because it's been eroding and it's been just sort of dropping mud and sand for the last weeks. And then they know that this is the place where it's a nick point and it's likely going to get washed away. It's going to get eroded in the next season. So I think there is a lot of, I think it's through a combination of science as well as local knowledge and a bit of, I suppose, field investigations, we can come up with some measure of predictability. Not the best, but useful enough.
And what's the time frame in which all this happens? Few weeks?
I think it's about a few weeks. So looking at what happened in 2015, it seemed like we knew that, okay, Cyclone Common made landfall on August 2nd. It was only by the end of August that such kind of rain, the clouds reached there, and such kind of precipitation occurred. This is not actually surprising because even, I suppose, in 2019, when the general elections occurred. So because Arunachal so people in Arunachal actually have to vote to the general election as well as the state election because it's logistically more feasible for them to for the election commission to go out there and set up booths. So it always happens in May. So in 2019, there was a severe cyclonic storm in the Bay of Bengal, and a whole bunch of people, workers of the election commission were trapped in the mountains. They couldn't move ahead. There was threats of ambush and sabotage. So and there was extreme rainfall. So I think there may, if we sort of dive deeper into the data and sort of get more information from people who have experienced extreme weather there, we could find something of a 3-week window to figure this out, and maybe longer, because we know that the cyclonic storm takes at least 5 days to develop and gather all its power. So we may have even 4 weeks.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question regarding some previous point that you had talked about?
Sure.
You spoke about the monsoon being a lot in September of this year, right? Last year, sorry.
Okay. Sure.
So is it like the northeast monsoon or the southwest monsoon or nothing like that? It's just a general rainfall.
So I think so in September it is part of the southwest monsoon.
Okay.
Okay, but Arunachal also receives rainfall in February. So essentially the wet season in a lot of places in Arunachal starts in late February and can go on till early November. What that means is it's not just that the southwest monsoon is playing a role in the rainfall here. There could be other, it could be the East Asian monsoon that is spilling over across the mountains of Burma and Yunnan and coming into Arunachal.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
No worries. So this is what Anupam looked like in 2004, and now all that remains is trees that are regenerating, a whole bunch of sediment, this dilapidated bridge that was under construction trying to connect Anupam to the rest of the district. It's also a graveyard of trees, and believe me, this from the edge of the forest out there on the farther side, all the way to where I'm standing, it's flooded in the monsoon. It's an incredibly powerful environment that people experience out there. And in the dry season, this place is a dust bowl. It's eroding. It's getting eroded by wind. So there's a lot of the banks are actually falling apart because there's wind erosion, and it's a very harsh environment even in the dry season. So unfortunately, there are other problems in this place as well. The victims allege that they have not received adequate state support to properly rehabilitate themselves. The compensation that they received was insufficient to build homes, and therefore they have been compelled to log wood from the forests around their villages. And logging has been going on in this legally since the British exerted their colonial power here in the late 1800s. Sadia, which is just north of the Lohit River, was the British frontier outpost, and it's only 30 kilometers away. Elephants were employed for logging, and the practice continues till today. So there is deforestation, there is biodiversity loss, but people are not being rehabilitated. So they're really in a sticky situation out here, trying to sort of figure a way out to make a better life. The problem is that scientifically there is some evidence that deforestation amplifies flood risk and bank erosion, but the forest loss data set from this region is quite complicated, and establishing a causal link is very difficult. This is especially challenging given the complexity of detecting and understanding tropical forest regeneration post-selective logging. So this is the deforestation data set that we have at the moment that is globally accepted to be, as good. It's got some limitations, but we can see that how complex this place is. So we know that these places clearly are because of the river spreading, but we also know we're not clear if these places have gone because of the river flooding, or if these places are going to be susceptible to more flooding in the future. So this is an open question that does require investigation. However, it is not useful to entirely rule out deforestation altogether, as some people do suggest, because local loggers also believe that deforestation has led to flooding and bank erosion. They're quite honest about it. They say that we truly have no choice. I mean, if I don't log it now, it's going to go tomorrow because of the floods. I might as well log it. And well, like there's little law enforcement in the area, so and there's little sort of understanding about the problems that come with logging. This whole sort of like this whole crisis, ecological crisis, sort of gets summed up when I was leaving Anpum one day and I met a Gran Panchayat member on the road, and I was just looking at this wonderful tree and just wondering what it would become 50 years later. And then he turns up and I asked him, let me start to do it in Hindi. I asked him, "Sab bada ped kahan gaya?" He said, "Nahi hai." I'm like, "Kyun?" I mean, like, he's just not there. I said, "So ye kaise bach gaya?" He's like, "Ye to reject hai." So I was shocked. So in English, what that means is the only trees that are remaining here are the rejects. So logging has really taken away all those beautiful 50-meter diameter crown trees, which perhaps were like, I mean, I don't know, sort of the giants of the forest. They're all gone. And there are elephants in this landscape. There are deer, there are tigers, there are leopards, there are some exceptionally rare animals like hog badger. It's quite a phenomenal place. But but coming back to the people, like they truly believe that the state has left them out to dry because they live in such difficult conditions. Some believe they should move out to a better area. For example, the bridge over Dibang, which is India's second longest bridge after the Dhola bridge over the Lohit River, is only like 10 kilometers away from this bridge over the Sisiri. And this particular bridge now stands in the middle of the river. Nobody uses it. The sides were filled up with debris and rocks and pebbles that were mined from the riverbed. In the flood, it got washed out. They've been constructing this bridge for 10 years, 15 years, and it's quite a sad state of affairs. This another person I met, he said, "Have you seen the bridge at Kadum?" I said, "Yeah, I've seen it on satellite imagery." He's like, that sort of that's the best example I can give you of what condition we are living in. And it makes sense because after the floods, this bridge just got, I mean, it's just lying in waste in the middle of the river, and there's nothing that can be done about it. People still have to use, dugout canoes that have to be logged for this. There's no state support in getting them perhaps better boats, motorized boats, or a regular, say, ferry service that could transport them across from one place to the other. So, and this is really difficult. It costs about 10 rupees to cross over this on this dugout canoe. So people have to, in a place when there's extreme erosion, people have to figure out a way. And the best way is to log wood. It's not like they know how to, create cement, or it's not like the best available material is there for them to create cement. And well, it's clearly cement doesn't work everywhere. The roads are in severe disrepair. The electricity is not available. Solar panels are too small. The schools are dilapidated. The villagers have to harvest wood all over again. There's no proper transportation, so people can't really. So the farmers are hit because they can't really grow enough food. They can't grow food that they can sell and make more money. The people who are at at loss are actually the women, because they have to stay at home. They have to take care of their children. They have to take care of the elderly. They have to take care of the livestock, the house, the small home garden. The men, the men also work hard, but they have to sort of look out and try and try and get more money. So they have to move away from the house and try and earn. So all in all, it's not exactly a very easy. The circumstances are quite difficult, and the state hasn't exactly made it easier for them in any way. Perhaps made it even more challenging. This is the state of the school at Bizari. And believe it or not, there are classes that go on in this room, and then when the monsoon comes, it's just flooding with water. The girls' dormitory is made of bamboo, and after the floods, they will rebuild it. There's clearly no warden, to take care of security and stuff. So it's quite sad that in such a remote place, I mean, even the basic government school isn't in proper order. The PHC has been abandoned. It can go on. During the monsoon, what happens is people have to use elephants as a means of transport. And they do this because habitually they've been moving around with elephants, because elephants have been there and have been used to log the forests around. So even now we hear of stories, and I mean, till recently we know of pregnant women who have had to get on elephant back, cross the rivers, get to a PHC, and then deliver their child. It's quite a grueling experience. I mean, I wonder what would happen to the elderly. They probably would not travel by elephant back. And it is so difficult that, well, this is the traditional house and loklung, and this is the missing community, which is a subtribe of the Adi group of tribes. And this is how they build a house. It is a lovely piece of architecture, there's no doubt about it, but unfortunately they are left with no choice anymore but to log wood from around their place. So earlier, let's say 50 years or 60 years ago, it may have been okay to log wood, given the population pressures were low, I mean, and the forest was quite vast. But since the Britishers have been logging this place, and as well as since the Indian government has been logging this place, there basically isn't enough good wood anymore. It's been logged into, it's degraded. It's quite a sorry state of affairs. This is how erosion occurs along the Dibang, and it basically just keeps cutting along the banks, and it keeps felling trees, and people just believe that I might as well take this tree and make a good house of it, or make some furniture out of it before the river takes it away. So what can we do? So I suppose flood risk reduction and mitigation, there are potentially many solutions to reducing flood risk. To begin with, I think a robust natural hazard assessment is required, and thereafter an appropriate model needs to be developed to alert citizens in case of any risk. Currently, no automated weather monitoring or water flow monitoring station is present in the Dibang River Basin. Personally, I know that this can be a challenging endeavor because the terrain is so difficult and the environment here is far from easy. But if we want to get things done here, the locals are exceptionally resourceful and brilliant at solving problems. So we can put up automated weather monitoring stations and get them to work whenever we want to, if we have to. Unfortunately, the state is not exploring all the available options. They are locked in technologically into constructing embankments and dams and they're marginalizing other possible solutions such as ecological restoration of degraded habitat, wildlife conservation for enhanced seed dispersal. Another possible solution is the creation of a riverine ecological buffer around the river. Another solution could perhaps be seeding and the reforestation or the regeneration of forest in old active landslides. Some people argue that deforestation may not be the primary driver of the bank erosion and the flooding, but it could be excessive sediments that are coming from active landslides far out in the river basin. While it could be, while some landslides may be impossible to get back into it may be impossible to cover some old landslides in forests, it may be possible to do it in some. Unfortunately, a glacial lake assessment is missing. It's not publicly available, nor is and this place is, and there are about 100 odd lakes. Some of my analysis shows that there are some exceptionally large lakes that are of concern in this region. The glaciers are rapidly receding and creating glacial lakes that could, exacerbate any kind of flood problems because of extreme rainfall. The problem here is that embankments are being built and without taking into account the evidence of their failure in Assam and Bihar. In addition, there are about 18 dams that have been proposed in the Dibang River Basin alone, and these includes dams for generating electricity and purported flood risk reduction. However, these proposals are more than a decade old now and they need revision given our progress in understanding flood propagation, the climate, and the weather. This is also a region of active seismicity because the Indian plate is being compressed under the Tibetan plateau. The largest instrumentally recorded earthquake of magnitude 8.6 was here. And it occurred not far from Lower Dibang Valley, the slated place over here where the Dibang multipurpose project is proposed to be built. And this this earthquake occurred on August 15, 1950. It wiped out several villages in the remote mountains and significantly reduced their population. And the chances of another large earthquake in the next 50 years is not exactly low. Like predictions of the amount of strain along the plate boundaries are not easy to make, and we don't know if there are going to be many small earthquakes or one large earthquake to relieve the strain along this plate boundary. The cost of these dams is sort of is exceptionally high.
Chintan?
Yeah.
Sorry. Pertinent to what you were just discussing, Sindhu PR has put up a question in the chat box. They asked, could some tectonic plate movements have caused the channel shifts?
Oh, that's a good question, because it seems like this has happened in other landscapes, and it's possible, it's very well possible that this may have happened, but it's very difficult to disentangle which earthquake and when, because depending on the kind of water and the load that is on these plates, or rather on these fault lines, they can shift much later than when the earthquake occurred, or they could shift like immediately. And the shift and the change in the topography could sort of take a while to express itself in the landscape. It's a possibility, but we don't have the instruments tracking minute changes in the land to exactly know what's gonna, how, if a seismic event was the cause of the shift. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. So the cost of these dams is exceptionally high, not only to the public exchequer, but also it will be costly for the country's people given a risky climate in the future. Like take, for example, India's largest dam wall ever proposed at 283 meters, I think, the Dibang multipurpose project that is going to be built at the end of the Dibang's gorge. It's perhaps going to submerge about 1,800 hectares of community-owned forest land. And this forest is rich in biodiversity. These are just the glimpses of what some of the dam sites look like. It's quite astonishing that such a place would want to be destroyed. And this is all during my 2015 trip. I had photographed this place when Anpum and Loklung were reeling under flood. It is truly a spectacular place. It's the gem of India's crown. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to describe. This is perhaps a new species of frog that is found there. It's just there's so much out there that we don't know. So these are just the glimpses, and so many of these areas have not been documented by academics, but the Idumishmi and the Adi tribes are quite knowledgeable of the forest plants and animals. But I mean, that doesn't. But I showed a photograph of an insect to a friend, and this person like, I can't even tell what order it is. And this friend of mine is supposedly an expert in insects. So academics also are quite stumped by what's going on here. What are we? So this is the biodiversity of the Dibang River Basin. We've got like 23 protozoan species, 55 arthro species, and the list goes on and on in numbers. We don't even have a proper checklist of plants. So last year, about 29 researchers collaborated to critically review a wildlife conservation plan developed by the WI for the Italian hydropower project. Unfortunately, the plan was far from rational or reasonable. It was so poorly written that they managed to report a bat species known only from the African continent. There were mathematical issues with the formulas used to assess the impacts on biodiversity. The flood risk and the natural hazard risk section was essentially missing, not only from the wildlife conservation plan, but it was also missing from the environmental impact assessment of the dam. So what is purported to be a flood risk reduction project perhaps may be exacerbating of the risk of floods, because our current understanding of how floods propagate through the system tell us that glacial lakes, when they burst from higher up in the mountains, they sort of propagate through the system as a wave. And this is different from extreme rainfall that actually does not propagate in the form of wave. It slowly increases the amount of water and then drains out eventually. So most of these flood risk, sort of flood mitigation dams are sort of designed for extreme rainfall events and not for glacial lake outburst floods. So these are some of the things that truly need attention. And this is quite frightening because there are several other reports on other hydropower projects in India that purportedly are for flood risk reduction. And unfortunately, they are either breaking the several nature protection laws and are falling well short of being rational. Unfortunately, there are so many dams and they're so damn risky. So the 1,800 hectares of old growth rainforest that is slated to be lost is as big as 2,500 football fields, and that's just from one dam. We're not sure what the other dams, how much area that is being proposed, that is slated to be submerged from the other dams. These are excellent habitats for tigers, takin, barking deer, civets. And it's, we shouldn't forget that these species are not exactly like blips in our evolutionary history. The takin, for example, is as old as perhaps like 10 million years old. Its fossils were found in Ethiopia. So these are true evolutionary mysteries and wonders, and the wonders of the Himalaya. Like the tigers are still present in this region because the Idu culturally believe that tigers are their kin, are their brothers, and that's why they protect and they don't hunt and they don't kill tigers. There are hundreds of insects, perhaps hundreds of plant species. There's quite a bit of stuff that is lost, but again, we come back to floods and this increased risk from GLOFs, earthquakes, and extreme rainfall if we have a dam that is supposedly meant to protect the land from floods. So all in all, it's possible that we may just lose much more than if such a project does come up. So finally, I can only hope that that we give more attention not just to the wildlife ecosystems and biodiversity of this place, but also to the people of Arunachal that have evolved a culture immersed in nature, sustaining nature's bounty and surviving through nature's wrath. It's not easy living out there, but that does not mean we destroy what nature we have to reap fleeting monetary benefits. That's the end of my talk. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I can take questions now.
Thank you so much, Chintan, by the way. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you,
Thank you.
Sindhu, Sharada, Sanjay, and Rama, everybody else who engaged. Please ask more questions if you have. And
Chintan, so I had a question. You were mentioning the village folks and whoever is living around. Also, they see signs that now we might be in danger, or now the river might be flooding. So you mentioned erosion and so on. Do people also notice some other symptoms that this might be happening? And can people studying risk or trying to calculate risk learn something from that?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was something out there that somebody knows, but we don't know, because, like a tribal or a local, because oftentimes we go in asking, questions that we want answers for, but it takes several weeks and a lot of time, of time, spending time over there to sort of understand if there could be something novel out there. It could be a hydrological observation, could be the observation on the fish. So the fish in this region are quite exceptional. Apparently, the fish from the river Anpum is a delicacy in Pasighat and in Rowing. So perhaps there may be clues out there. There may be clues in the vegetation. It's possible out there.
Thanks. Any more questions? If you cannot ask, please do put up your questions in the chat box and we will ask on behalf of you, or else you can just unmute and ask the question.
Hi, Chintan, this is Kara.
Hi,
I
Kala.
wanted to ask, which are the authorities under whose ambit such issues fall, and what are they meant to be doing? Because clearly there are a lot of things that are not being done.
So this comes under the ambit of the CWC, the Center for Water Commission. So Nehru actually created the CWC after the 1950 earthquake to say that, hey, you guys need to go, we need some committee to make sure that is to look out for the people in this region and generally for look out for floods across the country. But unfortunately, the CWC doesn't even have a water monitoring station on the Dibang. It has one on the Lohit, it has one on the Siang, has two on the Siang, in fact. But they both only give us astonishingly basic data. It just tells you water level. It gives us no idea about what exactly is the volume of water that is flowing per second. And in fact, China gives us better data from the Siang than we ourselves collect that kind of data. The second responsibility goes to not just to the National Disaster Management Authority, but also to the State Disaster Management Authority. They both have to develop a policy or find people to write the policy well, and at least start with the assessment of what are the hazards out there. And the second step would be to get a bunch of people, get a committee with well-meaning ecologists, hydrologists, scientists, engineers, and I'm sure there's no dearth of that. So it starts there. I suppose the CWC has to take more responsibility here. Well, the center too. I suppose the center is unfortunately, the center has caved into the businessmen's needs and wants. And it was UPA 1 and UPA 2. That's when several of these projects were proposed in Arunachal, because Jindal was a member of parliament. And Jindal has, Italian hydropower, like the project is actually owned by Jindal. So these are seemingly vested interests. So I'm not sure how much the center is also, willing to do in such situations.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I hope somebody takes notice, somebody gets a little sensitive in the near future before time runs out.
Okay, so Sindhu PR has another question. So do people living in the area have alternatives for housing which might reduce logging?
Potentially, but that means transporting cement from wherever the source is up to there and constructing it and having the expertise to do so. Unfortunately, the roads are in such bad condition that it would cost an arm and a leg for a poor person to get cement to build a house. And the state hasn't stepped in to build, say a cement platform or a raised cement platform, which is generally what people prefer to build, because when the floods come, they essentially are living on top of water for about a couple of months, and the water recedes and it comes back. So they're essentially fishing off the land. So I'm sure I've seen several houses in some places with cement structures, but a lot of people think that they shouldn't build cement structures yet because they have no idea of what the risk is. They have no idea when the river is going to come and take it out. And so a friend of mine guided me, and he said, I'm going to build a house there. And he's perhaps one of the best naturalists I've ever met. And I said, don't build a house there. It may just go. He's like, I have no choice. I can't go here. The forest department says this is their land, and there are elephants here. So it's a real challenge to build a pakka house in such a place.
Chintan, so
yeah,
I had a couple of questions. So the first one is actually in relation to this. So a lot of your talk, you have talked about how the locals use logs for their regular needs, but wouldn't you agree that that probably constitutes a very minor amount of the logging that is done here, the local needs, and majority of the logging is done to be exported out of Arunachal Pradesh, and it is more.
I agree.
So it is.
Sorry.
I mean, like the locals have been using wooden and bamboo houses for like generations. By generations, I mean from even before the British came, and that is actually much more ecologically sustainable solution in a region like Lower Dibang Valley, where you can actually build log houses. So it is not, the land is not as unstable as, say, the Lower Ganga Delta, like the Sundarbans. So you can actually put bamboo in and it will stand. And if in case of an avalanche, that is going to cause minimal minimal damage in terms of at least human lives. Like bamboo house is likely not to kill people, and in an avalanche, it makes the area safer in a lot of ways, and it is easier to rebuild those houses. So wouldn't you agree that a lot of this, in terms of logging, wouldn't it, I mean, in terms of state intervention, should we not rather focus on how the local people can sustain economically rather than looking at their housing? I mean,
Absolutely.
yes.
I can't agree more with you. I'm happy that this came to you, like this came to you right now. So we often see. Did you finish your question?
I'll continue with the rest of the questions as we go along. So this
Sure.
is one.
So okay. So I mean, this is true because logging has been going on. I mean, commercial logging has been going on since the late 1800s. So that's about 150 years easily of like logging that's been going on over here, and it's observable in the place. It all looks quite green and lovely, but if you just on the slide over here, this is the Siang, okay? This is the Siang and this is the Bang. So this entire region has been logged since the late 1800s. Only some bits and pieces of it could be, say, old growth forest. And all of this wood goes to Tinsukia and Dibrugarh. The easiest form of transport is to actually strap up the logs using cane or rope and like raft downriver. This is, by the way, this is Dibru-Saikhowa National Park, this island here. So Dibrugarh is somewhere here. Okay, so we can go all the way downstream in 3 days from here all the way till here, and you can sell it all off. And I visited Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. I visited this part. There's logging ongoing inside Dibru-Saikhowa National Park. There's a guard outpost here, and there's logging going on here. And there are people taking logs and moving them, floating them out to Dibrugarh. So while the needs are actually perhaps sustainable, or at least can be made sustainable, right? The requirement of logging for either firewood or building a house can be made sustainable. At the moment, there clearly doesn't seem like there is enough wood for the 600, 700 households that are in this place to build their house without damaging the system. So I'm not saying don't cut. I mean, I can't say, nobody can say that. Unfortunately, there's no choice. But I think the state needs to definitely consider ecological restoration as an option and take seriously the commitments that they have made to the people of India. Like, so I know personally that some of my work in the past actually helped in sort of motivating law enforcement to, sort of stop illegal logging. And I do know motivated officers on the ground who, both of the police, of the Indian IFS and the IPS, who are trying their level best. But on the other hand, we keep hearing news where Assam Anti-Corruption Bureau has got like a forest official, in a sting operation, buying illegal timber. So the problem is that it's a sparsely populated region. It's difficult to travel. It's difficult to move around in this place. Law enforcement is strung on cash. They basically don't have as much of resources for, I don't know what reason. We should be paying Arunachal money rather than Arunachal going, looking for hydropower projects. Exactly. Simply because they have so much of forest cover and they're giving us such phenomenal climate protection for the long-term future. It's people are not sort of looking at this that way, unfortunately. I mean, you can't be far from the truth. Yeah.
No, like another reason I talked about like letting the local people use logs for their personal needs is because that has been there, and that is like, it is very unlikely to be that the state will be able to stop that. On the other hand, the state does have does have enough machinery to stop large scale commercial logging. Like if you make the
Yep.
local people more self-reliant, they will not probably work for illegal loggers, because that is also a risk for them. And
Absolutely.
and if you additionally allow them to log, like to cut logs for their own personal needs, household needs, very likely they will like so I believe these are methods that have been proven to be, I just don't recall instances right now, but this twofold method is usually seen to be very successful wherever it is implemented. It is just very likely that because Arunachal produces such an enormous amount of lumber, there is a lot of mainland interest to not disrupt that lumber supply in favor of the ecology. So I mean, it is absolutely possible to save the ecology, but I mean,
So just for the audience's sake, so the last remaining old growth forests in Assam, in the entire 282, like let's say the Assam's, in the Assam Valley, the lowland tropical rainforest that was, with 50-meter, 60-meter, diameter crowns, and tree trunks spanning the size of your bedroom or like even larger.
yes, yes, yes.
Those are restricted to a small pocket of forest in Sonatpur district. I don't know why it's still protected. Perhaps the natural, the rivers or stuff have sort of prevented people from logging it, but everything else is gone. It's sad. I mean, I've seen it go in front of my eyes, so it's just going. It's there's too much of. I mean, in Tezpur there's too much of logging interest. In Guwahati there is. It's Dibrugarh. It's there, and it probably goes out of the country. It goes to West Bengal, and then I think it's out.
Yes. It has, and that route has been there since the British, and it just continued.
Indeed.
Post independence, the entire lumber industry in northeast Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, that just existed since the British period, and has just
So
continued.
now what's happening is that road construction companies and contractors are actually building roads poorly, either to make as much of money as they can from all the timber that comes out, or because they're just incompetent. So this is the situation right now. There's just not enough good work going on, out there to protect what we have, and even like I think. I mean, there's no other better way than how you put it. If there were a little more care, the local needs will be fulfilled. Like how in some parts of Arunachal that is the case, and you actually don't see logging there. Like in the larger part of Arunachal Pradesh, logging isn't an issue. It's just in these certain parts where logging is an issue. You see, because people have been getting enough of wood from either their fallow land on which they've been doing shifting cultivation for perhaps a 20, 30 or 40-year cycle, right? And they're getting enough wood from those fallow lands for their houses, and then they grow enough food in that, and they grow whatever food they grow on that land, and then they get meat, and in fact they hunt in their gardens essentially for meat, and they've been doing this even before like the silly Wildlife Protection Act came into effect. So
Yes.
I mean, hardcore conservationists will probably criticize me for this, but that's exactly the case. Even before Arunachal got its first road, Arunachal got its first road, or rather, let's say Dibang got its first road in 1977, and the Wildlife Protection Act came into effect in 1972. So it's just quite unusual for how the government of India expects, people in Arunachal Pradesh say, hey, the Wildlife Protection Act is in place. You guys can't hunt anymore. It's a little ridiculous. I mean, we need to sort of decolonize our mind and sort of look at it from an indigenous perspective. Like
Exactly. No, that is exactly my point here, because indigenous activists and politicians, they, at least in central India, parts where I'm more in touch with, they are constantly saying that the forest laws that have been made keeping in mind the interests of the mainlanders, and the forests have been safe with the indigenous people for like eternity, and they know how to stay in the forest, use the forest resources while not depleting them. But the forest is not like readily like massive source of resource for mainlanders, and it should not be made so. And they continuously keep saying that the forest laws are always made keeping in mind the interests of the mainlanders, and it rather should be made by the Adivasis, like by the indigenous people, and they should be the ones keeping, like, taking charge of the forests. So I mean, I do not
But that
have,
empowerment is that, but that empowerment itself is a challenge, right? How do you, like, how do you tell, how do you empower a population that is sort of caught in the crossfire of cultural transformation? It's so difficult for me to go tell, like, a friend that, hey, you shouldn't be using your phone so much. I mean, a friend, like, say in Arunachal, hey, you shouldn't be using your phone so much, it's just not good for you. But then
no, it is honestly not very much,
difficult to
like, as
empower.
I understand it, it may not be very much averse a thing that they are getting more and more, they're warming up more and more to the technology. And I'm saying this because a lot of many Santal and Munda organizations, they are preserving the knowledge of the, like, of the elders through YouTube channels and Instagram and these
Indeed.
online social media. And that is also the media through which they reach out to, like, the larger population and talk about their issues. So it is not that they are getting, like, introduction of technology is not inherently a challenge. I believe the challenge is the colonization of these people that have started in the British era, but still continue, because I mean, the indigenous people have never really been assimilated into India. Few of them have been, few peoples have been, but largely they have not been assimilated into India, and India has simply tried to like, grab the resources, like, establish control over the resources. And the forest officials, or at least the higher ranking forest officials, have been upper caste men and not local indigenous people. So,
Indeed.
and like, that basically builds up to the next question. I mean, you have been talking a lot about how these people depend on logging economically, like that is what they depend on for livelihood. What are the other options? I mean, do they have, like, fertile land nearby, and can the state take responsibility of things like healthcare and
Indeed, I
construction of
think
roads?
healthcare. So, for example, in Anpum, I think the money was sanctioned to build a public health center on the place where people relocated. So they relocated on their farmlands out here, right? Right. They relocated on their farmlands out here after being displaced from here. And the money got sanctioned, but the construction still hasn't happened. It's 6 years since the flood. The other thing is that they have wet rice cultivation, and some people do practice jhum cultivation. They have a vast, I mean, they fish a lot. They supply fish to Siang, to Pasighat, as well as Roing. Wet rice cultivation, unfortunately, gets raided by elephants in the herds of 200, 300, like what happens in Assam and in West Bengal.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's no solution to elephants.
No, there is
you
not.
can't kill them. It's unfortunately, like, that's not an, I mean, what I don't mean to say unfortunately. I mean, that is not an option. Killing elephants is not an option. But the state government usually doesn't. Oh wait, let me tell you this. So the forest department doesn't compensate people for crop raiding elephants in this region because they're not considered landowners. Why is that? It's because the Britishers came here and said that this is Dambuk Reserve Forest, that this is a reserve forest, and even right now on paper it is a reserve forest. And what is astonishing is that the Idu people have been there for longer than the Adi people, who now generally occupy this area. The Adi people generally occupy this area with a few Idu families. The Idu people have been there much before. So I'm talking about, we have evidence from Sadhya, which is here, okay, of Neolithic artifacts. I'm talking about stone, specific type of stone implements that could be as old as 5,000 years. And people may have, in fact, occupied this place like from as long as then, or may have occupied this place only in the last, say, half a century, in the last 500 years. Whatever it is, they do have claim to that land. They should be compensated for any crop raiding. That's the way the state has to support them.
Yes.
Or they have to move away from, say, wet rice cultivation, or sort of, disaggregate their resources into multiple sort of pools that economically sustainable options. It could in fact be bamboo, it could be, edible bamboo, it could be medicinal plants, it could be banana. I suppose if you get a bunch of people who want to think about it, a little more formally, it can be done.
Yes.
It's
No, also,
unfortunately our administration, just to finish up, our administration unfortunately lasts only for about a couple of years and then they get transferred. Nobody gets to stay there long enough to make as much of a difference as they want to, right? And I empathize with them. I totally understand the plight in which they are always sort of thrown around in the administration. And our system is essentially so broken that we don't have, even people who want to do good work can't do good work because nobody, we're more bothered about who says what on Twitter than, about how the administration is supposed to be making life better.
No, so that was part of what I said, that the administration in regions like this should have stakeholders. Like, it should not be like spearheaded singularly by like UPSC office, like civil servants, because civil servants are largely coming from the mainland and largely upper caste, or even if they're Dalits, like they're coming from the mainland. It should have like uh, like, so this gram, so you have stayed with gram pradhans there in that region, and uh, do you think it is possible for the gram pradhans to take up more charge, and if they were given more charge they would be capable of doing more good here in conjunction with the civil servants? Because
Surely,
like a gram pradhan is going to stay there for their entire life.
surely, and I think this has worked in other parts of Arunachal Pradesh. This particular place is facing seemingly a unique set of challenges, or a bunch of challenges that are unique to either the political situation here, or the way the different tribes are interacting with each other, or the way the administration is sort of working with the people. Unfortunately, people, also the Gram Panchayat members that I met, several of them are BJP like members. And the current MLA of the place is also a BJP member, but they vehemently are against her. And that's the situation. And they're not sort of afraid to speak out about it because they know that, and because they know that they've experienced severe negligence on behalf of the MLA specifically. In fact, the MLA on the East Young side. So basically, there's the boundary between East Young and Lower Dibang Valley runs somewhere around here, and it's basically, and then the rest of Lower Dibang Valley is on this side of the river. It geographically makes sense for them to be with part of East Young, and in fact, the MLA and of East Young did do quite a bit for them. He came by motorboat, make sure that everybody's okay, give them cash in hand, so on and so forth. There is good work that is also being done. I think the problem is that they first need to build a proper road there. Like, that road is, I think, 2 decades old. They need to build a proper road, get electricity, figure out what is good land, where is stable, safe land where they can set up for a while, and then move forward to try to build but this is all easy to say. I don't know. I honestly don't know what may be the other challenges that the administration may be facing or the politicians may be facing. It's unfortunately we never hear those stories. We don't know what's happening.
No, in fact, Bangladesh has faced this kind of similar situations in its, not when it is Bangladesh, it has been, so I don't know a lot about the recent times, but definitely before independence, there was a period, I think from 1920 to 40s, during which there was a massive shift in topography in one of the tributaries of Meghna. And so like a whole area of people, village fulls of people basically perished because there was nothing that could be done. And this sounds very similar to that particular catastrophe that I know of. And it is heart-wrenching to be witness to this. And
I think we have some friends from Arunachal as well who are here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Maybe if they want to speak, please go ahead. Like they can share their thoughts.
So Swagata has said for many tribal communities like the Missings, forests are community resources that they utilize and take care of. They work in synergy, not establishing control over resources by controlling nature. Wait, there are lots of comments. Chihi Umbre has said a large part of the village, Bizari, upstream to Anpum and Lokulung village got submerged in the early 1990s severe flood. Oh, they're asking if there is any study that shows the probable cause of the flooding of Bizari.
In the early 90s.
Yes, the early 90s.
So, I mean, if you go back to, let me sort of go back to my slides. Oh, so it's here. I'm sorry, just give me a moment. I'll try and find this. Yeah. So in the early 90s, as far as I understand, it was the main factor that flooded Bizari. And in fact, there was a village over here named, I forget, but I'll come back to it. There was a village here, and the people from here relocated to Bizari because of the 1998 flood. So this particular place, which was part of their Pani Kheti, which was their wet rights cultivation, they had to move. And the cause of this flood, there is currently no study that I am aware of or that I have been able to find on what happened here. But according to my assessment, I think it was the cyclone in May 1998 that led to this switch of the river of the Dibang's flow towards the western banks, and then it sort of took away it basically captured this particular river, which is referred to as the Dotum, and it sort of it moved further west, it captured it, and then sort of started pushing a lot of its water here. So naturally over here, like there is a lot of flooding of the forests as well. Like forests have disappeared because of flooding. So it is not necessarily always that deforestation can lead to flooding. It could always be that excess sedimentation and topographical changes are leading to the flooding. So I hope I answered Chihi's question.
I'm not sure if Chihi is still.
Okay.
You're still here. Chihi, you are still here.
Yeah, they said thank you in the chat box.
Yes, Chihi has replied in the chat box saying yes.
Yeah, so Jatish had also had a question. What would be the larger effect on India due to the changes in the Dibang Valley?
Well, that's really difficult to comprehend. It's a difficult question to answer, but well, if you're talking about, since we're in a globalized sort of economy where we're dependent on resources, like a single country is dependent on resources that come from different parts of the world, as well as the fact that we're dependent on general climatic stability and the fact that we need ecosystems to remain, or at least try and protect as much of these wilderness areas as possible and not sort of clear cut them or destroy them completely. The protection of Dibang Valley confers climatic and ecological stability to India's, perhaps like to India as a country, as a political entity. Perhaps may not affect anything that's happening in, say, Kanyakumari, but as a political entity, it does help. It overall sort of, it's like Dibang Valley and the rest of Arunachal Pradesh are truly sort of holding the fort for Assam out there, because a lot of the region is covered in forests and is not being wasted into landslides, burning Assam year after year. That's I mean, we're fortunate that that's not happening right now, but that is possibly what we can expect 50 years from now when climate change hits us I mean, in its full force. So that's one. The second thing is that Dibang River Basin is arguably the richest region for riverine birds in the country. So it probably confers benefits in terms of, for nature watching, for scientific expeditions, or just scientific study of birds. So for us to know more about this place, it confers benefits in the fact that if we protect the land and we help the people develop in the way they want to, we can learn from them. We can learn from the way they sort of live with biodiversity or in such a hazardous environment. And I suppose there is, just perhaps as a visitor going there, it can confer spiritual benefits as well. And that is not exactly only my thought. I think, and I suppose we do have some Idu friends in the crowd who may want to answer this question. The land does spiritually empower them, I suppose. I don't know, it does for me to some extent, going out there in the mountains. So, yeah.
Do you have more questions?
Thank you, Chintan.
Thank you. So should I stop sharing, Aditya? Does anybody have anything to say? Any friends from Dibang? Anybody else? Any thoughts?
If not, Tibro, maybe we can close the session.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chintan. Thank you so much, everybody, for
Thank you so
coming to
much,
the talk.
ICTS. Thank you, Sthai.
Thank you so much for engaging. Thank you so much again, Chintan.
Thank you, Chintan, for inviting this show.
Anoko. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anoko. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for.
I wish you could share any of your thoughts.
So it was a really nice program.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I share if you have any thoughts about anything.
Anyway, this is good information for us because we are just ignoring to all this kind of things. So technically we don't know, but you just provide us to let us know. So exactly, it was very nice, and thank you so much, Chintan, and hope to know you personally on regard this again.
Yeah. Anoko. Thank you so much. All right. Suppose.
Jatish, did you want to share?
Can I suggest something for Arunachal Pradesh economy? Is possible? Okay.
Yes, please go ahead. Jatish? Jatish, could you unmute yourself? I'm sorry, you are muted. Sorry.
Yeah, can I
Could you start again? We couldn't hear you.
Pardon me?
So we only heard until you said, can I share my thoughts on the Arunachal Pradesh economy? And then I think you got muted and we couldn't hear you.
Yeah. It's pertaining to the economy of Arunachal Pradesh. I'm not from the environmental sciences background. I'm from the pharmaceutical background. And we know that especially during the recent COVID pandemic, that there are a lot of medicinal plants in Assam, Arunachal Pradesh region, which could be very helpful for the future health of the country.
and this needs to be explored. So I think from environmental sciences group, the government should be activated to for the ICMR to put in some work there. If they do serious work, then this will definitely give some results. That's my suggestion. And medicinal plants, I mean, for this benefit of those audience, Wind blastin was invented in India for cancer patients years back on the same grounds. Thank you.
So vincristine and windblastin actually come from the Madagascar, a plant that is in Madagascar. Unfortunately, none of the benefits go to Madagascar. And Madagascar is in severe drought. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. So, I mean, I agree, like we should explore such avenues, but this kind of work takes like decades to sort of come back to actually benefit our healthcare system. But firstly, I think we need to support indigenous knowledge and and try and sort of encourage people to continue practicing their traditional ecological practices and the first step to that is not by creating policies that don't encourage, let's say, for example, genetically modified seeds. We need to be seed resilient. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about seed resiliency, but unfortunately, the UN is being compromised by people like Bill Gates, who wants to sell genetically modified crops. There are other problems about introduction of wet rice cultivation across Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. So a lot of so I'm not sure if this knowledge is currently under threat or is it doing okay in the more remoter parts. But it's something that we should explore and we should understand better. I'm sure botanists and ethnobotanists would have a lot and traditional elders and medicinal plant users and traditional healers would have a lot to share with us about those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so if we don't have any further comments, I think we'll stop recording and then